Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome again to another episode of Goodnight Stories from the life of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yesterday we talked about the Prophet's grueling journey between Mecca and Medina, which is known as the Hijrah or the migration from Mecca to Medina. And we spoke about the preparation, we spoke about the cave, we spoke about Suraqa ibn Malik, who was a Bedouin who tracked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that there was a miracle that prevented him from catching up to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and how he had requested a letter of basically a pact. He signed a pact with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he is safe and he will not be harmed, because at that moment he believed that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protecting him. Today's story is the joyful event of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam coming to Medina. Everybody knows the story. Everybody should know the song طلع البدر علينا, which was sung by the people of Medina when Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam arrived. So let's get to reading. The Prophet comes to Medina. It was a difficult time for the Muslims of Mecca. Their enemies troubled them all the time. They did not let them pray in peace. They abused them. Sometimes they even attacked them. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam told them to go to Medina, which was known as Yathrib at that time. Medina was a city some distance from Mecca. Its inhabitants had heard of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They came to Mecca to meet him. Upon meeting him, they became Muslims. And they invited the Prophet ﷺ and his followers to come to Medina. They wanted them to live with them. They also promised to protect them and to take care of them and to provide for them, just as if they were their own family. First, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ sent his followers. He did not go himself, but waited for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him a sign and permission to go. One day, Jibreel alayhi salam, the angel, came to him and told him, "Do not go to sleep tonight." And that was the sign. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's enemies surrounded his house at night. The Prophet saw them and told Ali ibn Abi Talib, his own cousin, "Sleep in my bed and cover yourself with my cloak." Ali lay down in the Prophet's bed, risking his life, while the Prophet ﷺ left the house. The Prophet ﷺ went to Abu Bakr's house, where Abu Bakr had 2 camels ready for the trip. They mounted the camels and left the city. They went to a nearby mountain and hid in the cave there. They stayed in the cave for 3 days. Their enemies looked and looked and looked, but could not find them. And one day, some people who were looking for them passed by the cave. They looked at the entrance of the cave and they're like, "Yeah, it looks like there's nobody there. There's a spider web covering it. There's a bird roosting in its nest. It's impossible that somebody's hiding in there." And then the search party just walked off, continuing their search. 3 days later, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and Abu Bakr left with a guide who took them across the desert. He took them by a route which only a few people knew, and he led them safely to Medina. Every single day, the people of Medina stood outside the city. Some of them even climbed date palms, if you know how high a palm tree can grow. So they would go sit on top of the palm tree and wait and look for the Prophet ﷺ to come. They looked towards the desert and waited for the Prophet. They waited for many days, but he did not come. He came finally on a really hot afternoon. He stopped in the shade of a palm tree, and the people greeted him. They were happy he was among them at last. The first sermon which the Prophet ﷺ gave to the people of Medina has been recorded in the books of Hadith, and it's called the first khutbah that Muhammad ﷺ gave in Medina. In the sermon, the Prophet ﷺ did not say a word against the people of Mecca who had persecuted and chased him and driven him out the city. The Prophet ﷺ simply warned the people of Medina about hellfire and reminded them of the Day of Judgment, when every soul would stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be judged, as well as be rewarded or punished according to their deeds. And that summarizes briefly what happened when Prophet ﷺ arrived to Medina. Now there are more details. Among those details that the Prophet ﷺ rode his camel, and the camel basically was walking into the city, and the people were so eager and so excited to host Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in their house, in their land, to have him come and live with them, just like the other Muslims did. And everyone would come and grab the camel by its rein and try to pull it. And the Prophet ﷺ would say, leave it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered it, and it will go to where it has been ordered. And as the Prophet ﷺ made his way through the streets of Medina, all the children, the women, the men came out and they were chanting طلع البدر علينا من ثنيات الوداع. It's a very, very famous song, nasheed that the Ansar were singing when the Prophet ﷺ arrived. They were ecstatic. And there were some people who weren't too happy because they knew that when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came to Medina, things would be different. And in the next chapter, inshallah, we'll look at how Prophet Muhammad ﷺ tried to protect and help everyone. One thing, interesting fact, is where that camel finally stopped and sat down is where the Masjid An-Nabawi right now is in Medina, where the Prophet ﷺ built his first house and where they built the first masjid. The Masjid An-Nabawi. It's the second masjid in Islam. Ask your parents, what is the first masjid in Islam? And there's an interesting story to that as well. Thank you again for tuning in. Like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't like it, subscribe to the channel so you get to watch this series and the other programs that we have this Ramadan. Follow us on Facebook and join the conversation there. Jazakumullah khair. Have a great day fasting, and we'll see you tomorrow inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.